The morning the lilacs opened, I set the table like memory was a guest who always arrived on time. Blue rose china, the good fork that feels like a promise in the hand, linen napkins pressed flat as the horizon. I wore my Sunday blouse because dignity has a way of keeping a woman warm when love forgets its jacket. I sliced the lemon cake thin and even, 3 modest squares, spaced the way you space hope, so it doesn't crowd you. I brewed tea until the kitchen smelled like sunshine caught in a kettle. Outside, the street glittered with balloons tied to wrists and car mirrors. Inside, my clock practiced patience. I told myself, noon was not a betrayal. Not yet. At 1, I refilled the sugar bowl as if that mattered to anyone but me. At 2, I carried my plate to the window and learned again how silence can wear heels. It clicks across a room. It stands in the doorway and dares you to ask its name. A girl in coral shoes balanced a bouquet bigger than her arms and crossed Mrs. Jenkins's lawn without crushing a single blade. That kind of grace is learned young. My cup cooled, and I would not cry. The eyes of a woman my age have done enough mopping. I took a bite of cake with the seriousness of an oath. Tart, sweet, intact. I ate alone with my back straight, the way my mother taught me to do everything that might break a heart. The knock came when the light had begun to lean. Not timid, not eager, practical. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door to a young man in a brown jacket. Cheeks windburned, hair insisting on its own plans. Delivery for Carter, he said, reading without looking up. The name sat between us like a coin. That's me, I answered. And for a strange second the word felt both true and borrowed. He handed me a warm bag that smelled like Sunday money and a white envelope, heavy as a stone you decide to keep. Enjoy, he said, already turning, the way people do when they know the script is short. It was a feast for 3, stuffed chicken, mashed potatoes that still remembered the shape of the spoon, asparagus in neat green rows. For a moment I let the old wish take me, the one where my son redeems himself with a flourish that saves face and saves time. Then I opened the envelope. Not a card, not a joke. Paper with a logo too proud of itself and the calm voice of something expensive. Welcome to your residence, it said to my future, using my full name like a teacher. The details were the color of frost clear and unforgiving. Move-in date, insurance, allergies, the pills I hid in a dish behind the flour because I liked choosing when to remember. And there, bright as a bruise, my son's email, arranged to look like care. My name, my numbers, my life, printed as if lives are tidy if you use enough ink. I steadied myself on the counter and discovered how the body knows when a floor is an ocean. The packing slip on the catering bag told another truth. Portions labeled for him, for his wife, and for her mother. Not for me. I found the sticky note tucked inside, written in the quick handwriting of a woman who drives with one hand. Have Doug sign. She'll be out before summer. Thank God. The house became a bell. My heart rang inside it. I sat down and let the kitchen chair hold all of me. For months, I had edited the world to make it kind. The interruptions, the suggestions wrapped in velvet rope. The way my granddaughter's visits were suddenly busy. The way my son's voice became a manager at a meeting. Cheerful and tight. Love has 1,000 disguises, and sometimes it shows up in a uniform that looks like safety. But safety and silence wear the same shoes. They walk you out of your own door if you don't watch them closely. I watched the letters on the page until they stopped moving, and I made a choice older than me. I would not go quietly. Not into any building with a mural of smiling seniors walking a path designed by a committee. I phoned my son, and his hello came wrapped in errands. Been a day, ma, he said, as if days were the excuse and not the habit. I told him what had arrived. I told him the date they'd picked for my vanishing. Something small in the line went still, like a dog holding its breath. We were going to talk to you, he said, when the silence realized it was late. We just wanted to make it easier. Easier for who? I asked in the voice I saved for folded flags and tax offices. Rachel thought, he began. I stopped him. Your wife's thoughts don't fit my life like shoes, I said, and neither do yours. If they walk me anywhere, I didn't choose. I did not shout. I did not bargain with the boy I raised inside the man who could not meet my questions. I told him he was not to come. I told him I would be taking care of my future with the same hands that taught him to tie laces and light a match safely. Then I hung up and let my pulse learn how to be still again. There is a box in my hallway closet that outlived a fire and a flood, and the year grief tried to take me for itself. I laid the retirement packet on top of that box and opened the drawer that keeps my backbone. Deeds, policies, a will that had grown lazy with love, numbers that become doors when you put them in the right order. I ran my finger down a column to the account he'd known since the year I let him be my errand runner after hip surgery. Just in case, I'd told myself, and the case had arrived, wearing his face. I placed my palms on the papers and felt the old skill, the one no one celebrates. So, I called a woman I have trusted since high school, back when we thought dresses could change what rooms we were allowed to enter. Ruth's voice came through the line with the steadiness of a handrail. "You sound ready," she said. I laughed. "A sound like a cupboard opening." "I am." She arrived that afternoon with a briefcase that thumped down like a gavel. We made a new map. The house became a trust with walls a thief can't climb without cutting himself. The accounts changed their locks. The will remembered the difference between blood and love, and did not confuse them anymore. I signed my name, mine until my hand ached and my eyes watered. Not from sadness. From the pure relief of ink telling the truth. Ruth asked if I wanted to file elder fraud, she said, like a diagnosis that can finally get a prescription. I shook my head. "Not yet," I answered. "Some men only recognize mirrors when they think they're alone." I wanted to watch my son meet himself without my shadow there to give him an alibi. 2 days later, my granddaughter called. Her voice is a brook you can drink from. "Grandma," she said softly, "are you okay? It is a dangerous thing. That question. It can pry open a dam." I breathed past it. "I'm as I should be." She told me she had heard the walls of her house arguing. She did not repeat the words. She did not have to. Children become archaeologists when adults bury the truth under breakfast. "Come," I said. "But come as yourself, not as their messenger." She came with hair that had decided to be unmanageable, and eyes that refused to be. She read the papers at my table and her hands shook for both of us. "They lied," she whispered, and a piece of the world settled into its right place again. Sometimes that's all redemption is. Another person saying your eyes aren't broken. We made tea the way churchwomen do when prayer needs something to hold. We sat with the steam and the quiet and the sound of a lawnmower far down the block. She asked me what I would do. I told her I had already done it. She nodded like a woman who has decided which road to take, and in that moment I saw the future find its feet. Rachel came to my porch in sunglasses like a shield. She began with the sentence polite people use when they are about to steal your furniture and ask for a thank you. "We only want what's best," she said. And I felt the familiar fatigue of being managed by someone who confuses control with care. I let her speak 3 minutes, because mercy is a discipline and I keep mine sharp. She talked of gardens and massages and community, as if joy is something you can schedule and label. I told her comfort is owning your morning and your night. Comfort is leaving a book face down and finding it open where you left it. Comfort is the small violence of scraping burnt rice out of a pot and deciding which parts you'll eat anyway. She asked if I had really locked my son out. "Yes," I said, "and myself, back in." She warned me I would regret it. I smiled the way women do when they have already survived the worst day and discovered the world did not end. "No," I said, "but you might." After she left, I wrote letters to the facility, to my doctor, to those who are paid to be skeptical. Paper is a city if you build enough streets. I made sure anyone who tried to drive me out would hit every red light I could afford. Then I put the kettle on again, because revolution has intermissions, and they taste like tea. My son arrived without a suit and without a script the following afternoon. And grief walked up my steps, trying to look like my boy at 13. He stayed on the path, like a man who understands fences at last. "Ma," he said, and the word shook its dust onto the porch. He offered me explanations that went brittle in his mouth, and I let each one fall. "I was scared," he said. "We've got so much. The bills, the girls." He made a pile of obligations and pointed at it like a fire he couldn't bring himself to stamp out. "So you planned a life where I became a task to outsource," I answered. The truth sat between us, impatient and bright. He told me he was sorry. I believed him in the way you believe a forecast. It might rain, but you still bring in the cushions. He handed me a letter from his daughter, and I read the trembling handwriting that said love with its whole chest. I folded it carefully. "She sees," I told him. "That's enough for now." I sent him away because love with no boundary is not love. It's erosion. On the morning I signed the last page Ruth brought me, I stood at the sink and watched a bee shoulder its way into a camellia. There is a nobility to small labor, a law in it. The house felt taller somehow, as if paperwork could add beams. I phoned the library and asked about the word storytelling. They said Thursday evenings. Bring yourself. That felt like the first true invitation I'd had in a long time. The days that followed learned how to be ordinary in a new key. I swept floors that had been waiting for my attention to be light and not worried. I opened the windows and let the house breathe like a lung. I cooked for the kind of hunger that doesn't apologize. The neighbors waved the way people do when they're not sure if they should stop and ask questions. I waved back with a softness that said we will both be fine if we keep our gardens watered. My granddaughter came on Sundays with her tote bag and the kind of appetite that honors a kitchen. We cooked slow food that doesn't perform for dinner parties. She peeled carrots like confessions and learned the heat at which onions turn honest. We ate from plates that remember other mouths, and we talked about futures that don't have to repeat old errors. Will you ever talk to Dad again? She asked, and the room held its breath with her. Maybe, I said, but when I do, it will be like speaking across a fence we both agreed to build. Forgiveness is sometimes a bench by that fence. You sit, you breathe, you look up at the same weather, and you don't pretend the past forgot your address. I went to the library. The room smelled like paper and old ambition. Women my age sat in a circle and told their small enormous truths. A widow described learning to change a light bulb after 50 years of letting someone else reach high. Another woman read a list of things she could fix with her own hands. Now, a hinge, a hem, a heart, if she was careful. When it was my turn, I spoke into the air that had listened to everyone else and said, "They tried to move me like furniture." The room hummed. "But I have legs," I added, and laughter rose gentle as steam. I told them about the boy I raised, and the man he became, and how I found the line that kept us both from drowning. A young librarian wiped her eye and handed me a tissue as if I were the first person to ever need one. People started to come by, not in a flood, in the trickle that heals. A woman with a bruise asked where to start. "With your name," I said. "Put it on the first line." A man with trembling hands asked how to talk to a bank. "As if it works for you," I answered. We wrote lists and phone numbers and practiced the art of saying no with a polite spine. I learned that legacy is not money you leave, but a sentence someone else can use like a key. Summer leaned in, heavy and honest. The fig tree went wild with itself, and I carried bowls to the fence for anyone passing by. "Take two," I called. And the children learned the taste of something the sun built from water and a stubborn root. My mailbox filled with letters from women who had been listening with their whole bodies. I told them no. One wrote, "The ink furies and steady." I told them no. Another wrote, and the pen had left a dent in the paper. I pinned those words near the phone because sometimes a talisman is a sentence. My son wrote a postcard with a shoreline where the sea rehearsed infinity. "I'm trying," he wrote, and the tide mark on the card said sometimes an attempt is the only honest shape a man can take. I didn't reply. Not with ink. I answered by staying in my house and sleeping through the night. And growing green things and not handing my quiet to anyone who hadn't earned it. One evening thunder stitched the sky, closed and opened and closed it again. I turned off the radio and listened to the roof work. The power flickered and caught, like a breath that had been run too fast. In that half dark, I remembered the beige walls of places that call themselves homes for people like me. I remembered how pity has a smell. I remembered the way some hallways steal your footsteps and keep them. I had not lived there, but I had visited enough rooms, doctors' rooms, office rooms, rooms where women apologize for being alive, and I knew the taste of institutional quiet. My house tasted like cinnamon and rain. I sat in it as if it had muscles, and I felt it hold me back. Autumn put its elbow on the sill. Leaves rehearsed, letting go. I began sleeping with the window cracked because cold air can be a kind of forgiveness. My granddaughter sent me pictures of her life starting to bloom away from here. A hallway with mismatched rugs. A stack of books that thought they were furniture. A kitchen the size of a laugh. "I hear your voice when I adjust the flame," she texted, low and patient. I imagined her stirring soup and choosing salt, and I blessed every bite with my silence. I began to collect small, necessary objects. A new doormat that says simply home. A wind chime that refuses to be shrill. A thick pair of socks for the mornings when my knees remember every stair I climbed. I sorted the recipe box and kept only what still loved me back. I added a card titled, "First Dinner with Someone Worth Cooking For," and wrote at the bottom, "No substitutions for tenderness." On the street, people waved with less caution. They asked about the flowers and I told them camellias bloom in defiance. One child asked why they were red. "Because some things refuse to whisper," I said. And his mother smiled the tired smile of someone who hasn't been heard in a while. Winter came polite this year. The cold was the kind that invites quilts and long talk. I knit again, not for babies, not for gifts, for my own lap, for the shape of patience in a fabric you can touch. The rhythm of it talked to my bones. Loop, pull, release, loop, pull, release. Prayer without the trouble of asking for anything. On a Tuesday that behaved like a Sunday, the mailman brought a letter in my granddaughter's firm hand. She wrote about a boy who had learned to apologize without decorating the word, and how she could forgive him from a distance without confusing the map. She wrote about being the first woman in our line to have a door with her, name on the lease before a man's. I pressed the paper to my mouth and tasted ink. Pride is a clean flavor if you haven't had it in a while. As I grew older in my own house, people started to call me kind. I'm not. I am deliberate. Kindness without boundaries is just a way to bleed. I hold a gate. I oil the hinges. I let in what can sit at my table without wanting my chair. I stopped explaining the difference to anyone who hasn't earned the lesson. Sometimes, I see my son in the grocery store at the hour when the workers restock and the night smells like cardboard and apples. He reaches for the same jar of jam we both liked when we were broke and brilliant, and our hands hover. We nod. We do not speak. This is a kind of truce the world doesn't understand. It is mercy measured in jars and aisle lights. He looks better, sober in the ways that matter. He moves with the caution of someone who reads warning labels now. He ghosts the edges of my days, and I let him. A mother can love a man and not invite his weather. On my porch, the fig tree keeps teaching the only sermon I trust. Break open. Be sweet. Feed those who can reach. It drops fruit I can't bend fast enough to catch, and I laugh alone in the dusk. A sound like permission. Birds argue delicately about who owned what first, and the sky answers with a shrug the color of bruised peaches. I have come to understand that the world is not cruel, not kind. It is exact. You do a thing, the thing leaves a mark that is the shape of itself. The best we can do is choose which marks we will live beside. If you ask me, now, what I am, I will not say mother first. I will say woman. The mother is inside that, and the grandmother is inside that, and the girl who ran through wheat with her shoes in her hands is inside that too. Laughing at how dust turns gold if you run long enough. I am a name I wrote myself this morning and will write again tomorrow until the letters learn my weight. There are nights I wake and listen for the train. It is far, but the sound remembers me. It ties the two ends of the country together with iron and returns rhythm to my heart. On those nights, I think of the day a stranger handed me an envelope that thought it could predict my ending. I think of the way my hands did not shake when I picked up a pen. I think of how quietly a woman can move mountains when she finally stops asking who gave her permission to try. I sit like that, a small lamp on, the room breathing around me, and I let the final truth for this life rise without effort. I am not here because they let me stay. I am here because I built a place no one can lift, and I named it after myself. In the dark glass, I catch my reflection, and I look exactly like every woman who taught me how to hold a storm until it broke. I look like the root, not the burden. Never the burden. The root that held when a careless hand tried to tear it out. Morning comes. It always does. On schedule without apology. I pour water over leaves and watch the color change. I place one cup on the table, sometimes two, depending on who has earned a chair. I open the door to let the day in like a well-behaved guest. And if anyone listening needs a final sentence to carry away like a warm roll in a napkin, take this: when they bury you, remember the soil never learned the difference between grave and garden. Decide for it. Then I turn the radio low, so it murmurs rather than insists. And I eat my slice of cake with a fork that feels like a scepter in a country of my own making. And I let the quiet fill the room, not as absence, but as proof soft, haunting, wise that my life, at last, belongs to me. Winter loosened its grip the way an old hand lets go of a rail slow, careful, knowing another rail coming. I woke before the sun and listened to the house stretch, boards answering one another in the quiet, a language I learned after my husband died. We're here. We hold. We keep. I slipped on my robe and padded to the kitchen, the tiles cool and certain beneath my feet. The kettle was kind to me. It always is at dawn. I stood by the window while it warmed and saw the first seam of gold crease the eastern hedge. A soft beginning. The kind you don't clap for. The kind you respect by breathing softer. I thought of my son then, not as he is, not as he was, but as a moving figure between the two. A man walking across a bridge of his own building with no railing but honesty. I did not pray for him. I have retired from telling heaven how to spend its time. I just said his name in my head, the way you say a place you once lived, with affection and caution, in the same breath. Letters kept arriving from women whose hands remembered keys no one had copied for them. I told them no. One wrote again, this time with steadier cursive. Another enclosed a photograph of her front door newly painted, a color brave enough to be called blue in any weather. Small revolutions. Useful ones. I pinned the photo to the side of the fridge with the magnet shaped like a strawberry, and told the house, look how the world learns. Ava came by with a bag of groceries she couldn't afford but brought anyway. She handed me a jar of honey with the comb still floating inside. Bees geometry caught in amber. For your throat, she said, and I heard the unspoken clause. For the words that need to last. We sat at the table and shared an orange like a secret. She told me about early mornings at the cafe, about the woman who tips in rolled quarters and apologies, about the man who orders coffee like a confession and stares at the door like redemption might walk in and pick a booth. People are lonely, she said. They give it numbers on podcasts, but it's just a body wanting a witness. I squeezed her hand. That's all love ever is, I said. A witness with patience. Ruth called with a voice that has never learned to panic. There's a hearing, she said. The state wants to understand a few things at last. I ironed my blouse, the way my mother taught me, shoulders first, then the rest. At the courthouse, I sat in a chair that had held 1,000 versions of trouble. I kept my back straight, because sometimes that's the only sermon you can preach. A man with tidy glasses read facts into a microphone. Ruth said my name as if it were a key. When it was my turn, I didn't tremble. I described a delivery in a brown jacket, an envelope with a future I did not order. The way paper can be a trap if you sign in the wrong weather. Do you hate your son? They asked, as if that would help them file. No, I said. I've simply moved him out of rooms where he breaks things. The stenographer tried not to smile. I left the building lighter by nothing visible. That's how real weight behaves. Guilt is iron. Relief is air that remembers your lungs. On my way home, I stopped by the thrift store that always smells like talcum and cedar. The bell over the door is a child who refuses to grow up. I found a small lamp with a milk glass shade, the kind that throws light without making a room confess more than it intends. I paid in cash and wrapped it in yesterday's newspaper and carried it like a polite lantern through the afternoon. That evening, I pulled the letters from my drawer, mine, Ava's. The one that started all this with its slick logo and its audacity, and I arranged them on the table like tiles in a game. I finally understood. The past, the proof, the promise. I lit the new lamp and watched the light rest on each page the same, refusing to gossip. Sometimes, after supper, I go out to the fig tree and listen to it think. Trees think slowly. You have to match their speed. I put my palm on the bark and feel time pressing upward, sap translating sunlight into something edible. I thank it out loud, because gratitude grows better when you feed it air. The camellias along the fence were poised to open, red coals asleep in their green stove. I told them they could take their time. Beauty is not a bus schedule. Jason, that's my son. I can say his name now without tasting salt scent, a text with a picture attached. The ocean again, but closer. His shoes off. His toes in the surf like a man auditioning for baptism. Been walking. He wrote. No punctuation. I took that as mercy. The sentence felt honest, ragged, like a cut that will heal without a scar if you stop picking at it. I didn't write back. Not because I am cruel. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a trying man is let him try where you can't see him sweat. At the library, the circle of women grew. New faces, old aches. One brought a tin of shortbread cookies that tasted like Scotland and weddings. Another brought a folder of photocopies, forms and lists and the names of clerks who didn't sigh when you said you were 70 and needed a new start. We passed the folder around like a loaf. Take what you need, she said. Leave what you can. I read a page I'd written the night before about small bravery, how it's not the storm door you bolt in a hurry, but the way you remember to oil the hinges afterward. A man stood near the returns desk pretending to shelve an atlas and listened without pretending. After we finished, he approached with the careful hands of someone who knows women do not owe him their time. I heard you speak, he said. My mother is, well, I'd like her to hear you too. I gave him the schedule and wrote down the name of a lawyer who curses only when necessary. Bring her, I said. We sit in chairs. The rest happens by itself. One morning, a fat envelope arrived with the state seal embossed like a thumbprint. The case was moving, slow but honest. We are reviewing policies. The letter lied kindly. I put it in the file where I keep hopeful bureaucracy. That afternoon, Ava and I mixed soil and laughter in equal measure and started seeds in cracked teacups. Cheap pots, I told her. Make brave roots. She wrote that in her phone, as if it were something a person could sell on a pillow. I have started talking to the house aloud, not like a madwoman, like a friend who remembers your birthday unasked. You've done well. I tell the floor after I sweep. We fooled them. I tell the door as I slide the bolt at night. We're still in here. The house answers with heat in winter and shade by afternoon. It's our contract. I keep it clean. It keeps me mine. I went to see Mrs. Jenkins, she of the daughter with the bouquet, when I noticed her curtains had not moved for 3 days. The air in her living room stood still like a polite guest. She was in her chair with a blanket over her knees, television shining on her face like a quiet moon. I forgot the world, she said. It happens, I told her. I made tea in her kitchen, which has the geometry of the kitchens on my block, 2 steps from stove to sink. 3 to the pantry, the clock above the doorway that clicks more loudly at night. We sat and drank and remembered husbands who spoke to tools like parishioners and children who learned to slam doors before they learned thank you. I heard about your son, she said eventually. Everybody hears. I smiled without malice. Let them, I said. Let the story be the fence the next woman leans against when the wind comes. The wind came late that evening with rain shaped like needles, stitching the street to the sky. My power blinked and then returned with a shrug. I lit the milk glass lamp anyway and read by it to show the dark I had options. The book was a novel about a woman who left a man and found a mountain inside herself she'd only ever circled. She climbed slow. She put both hands on every stone. She scaled without bragging. I closed the book and pressed it to my chest. Me too, I told the room. The lamp knew. Jason knocked once at the edge of night and waited the way men do, who have learned that entering is a privilege. I opened the door enough for air. He looked thinner, as if worry had been billed by the pound and he had paid. I took my name off the thing, he said without preface. The place. I told them what we did. The rain behind him made a curtain. I moved the lamp so its light fell on his face, and not on mine. Good, I said, and with that one word I let him stand in a square of mercy he could afford. He did not come in. He did not ask to. He just nodded like a student who finally found his place in the alphabet and went back down the steps into his own weather. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the wood and felt the house agree with me. That was enough. Spring arrived shameless. The camellias performed. The fig leafed out like a green choir. The street remembered children. Chalk maps appeared on the sidewalk, and more than once I caught myself hopping squares in my head while the kettle sang. A package came from a return address I didn't recognize. Inside, a small hand-carved sign. On one side, the word root. On the other, return. No note. I hung it by the back door and spun it according to the day. A Sunday afternoon brought the smell of ribs from 2 houses over, and the sound of arguing from 1 house down. Ordinary life, which is to say, hard, delicious, survivable. I baked cornbread for no reason and put a plate on my porch table in case a neighbor's courage needed carbs. A sparrow tried to carry off a crumb too big for its beak, and I cheered out loud when it managed. In my chest I felt the old ache unbuttoned itself and sit on the step beside me like a tired ant. You can stay, I told it, but you can't speak. It nodded. We watched the sky work. At the library, a girl of 12 came with her grandmother and sat at the back, chin in hands, listening like she was building a nest from every sentence. Afterward, she approached shyly. My mom says, my grandma forgets, she told me, but she doesn't forget the song to make the dough rise. I knelt carefully, because 77 is honest with your joints and looked her in the eyes. Then make it with her as often as you can, I said, and write the song down in your own hand. Paper remembers who taught it. I began keeping a notebook by the bed again, not the war book of numbers and deeds, a soft one, pages for small astonishments, the exact blue of the neighbor's door after rain. The sentence, a boy on a bike shouted to no one, I'm doing it. The way the cat 3 houses over chooses my porch to practice arrogance. The smell of Parma violets that arrives with the mail on certain days like an unearned kindness. I date each entry and add 1 line at the end, a kind of inventory. I am here. The state sent its final letter in a practical envelope, language thin as cracker, crisp as law. Resolved. It said, not a parade, not a hymn, just a verdict that made my body put down something I hadn't known I was carrying. I placed the letter with the others and made stew that tasted like winter apologizing to spring. When Ava arrived after her shift, we ate with our elbows on the table and laughed at nothing until we cried. You look taller, I told her for the 100th time. That's because you're sitting up straighter, she answered, and maybe it was both. At dusk, she helped me plant the seedlings we'd bullied into being. Knees in the dirt, hands busy, hearts quiet. She hummed a tune from nowhere. I added harmony that didn't belong to any church, but would not be turned away. We patted the soil like you pat the shoulder of someone brave enough to show up. After she left, I stayed outside and watched moths make fools of themselves in the porch light. My grandmother used to say, everything needy turns toward brightness, whether it knows what it is or not. I turned off the light so the moths could find the moon. I've finally learned we don't need every lamp to see. Night lays its cool hand on my head earlier these days. I go to bed with the window cracked and the radio low, an old ballad threading the room to the dark. I lie there and consider the map of my living. How many rooms I've left, how many rooms I've claimed, how many doors I've closed gently, how many I've opened with both hands. The house breathes. The fig keeps counsel. Somewhere a train counts its own heart out loud. I say my name once, maybe twice, to make sure it's still the shape of me. And if the wind is right, and memory is behaving, I hear the oldest instruction I ever learned. Floating up from those soft places under everything. Keep the gate. Keep your tongue when silence is the better weapon. Keep your lamp where you can reach it. Keep your chair pulled out for the one who comes with clean hands. Keep your peace, like a ledger that balances at day's end. Keep. Morning will come again tomorrow, and ask nothing extravagant. A cup, a plate, a decision to be gentle with yourself before the world has a say. I will fill the kettle and set the table for whoever arrives, daughter, granddaughter, neighbor, or no one at all. If no one, I will sit anyway, spine tall, fork sovereign, and eat what I made with these hands that have learned both surrender and refusal. The clock will tick, the house will answer, and the light will find me where I am, which is all I ever needed it to do. If you are listening in your own dim kitchen, if the envelope has come or the silence already sits where your son should be, take this with you, not a command, not even advice, just a spare key in your palm. The soil never learned the difference between what they meant as an ending and what you can make into a beginning. Plant yourself. Be still until you feel the water rise. Then grow the way light grows quiet, certain, and impossible to evict.